And I was shown how a kind word had saved someone's life, like one kind word, how it had rippled out to somebody trying to commit suicide. And because of that kind word and the ripple, that they did not take their own life. I was shown basically the importance of our every thought, word, and action. And we are far more powerful than we know. And many times we think about changing the world in these grand acts of benevolence and moving mountains, when actually it's these small shifts in the compass of our own existence where we're actually moving from a place of love rather than fear. So it would be moving outside of the norm and doing just something slightly different. And that's what changes the world. Like when you could be cruel, be kind. When you could abandon, stay. When you could hurt, help. When you have every reason to be mean, do the opposite.
Well, hello, Chrystal Rae. Welcome to the show. I am truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
I feel great. I'm so glad to be on your show. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, well, hey, thank you for being here. You know, every week we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming, because today I am joined by Chrystal Rae, a former high-performing corporate exec whose life took a radical turn after a near-death experience shattered everything she thought she knew and revealed a far greater truth. Imagine waking up and realizing that everything, your trauma, your patterns, your pain, and even your gifts, were not random at all. They were coded messages from the soul, a divine setup, the beginning of an awakening. And in her near-death experience, Chrystal was immersed in a realm of pure, unconditional love and received a message that changed everything. Love is all that matters. And since then, she's become a multidimensional healer, an intuitive guide helping others move from survival to soul-led living, reclaiming their voice, their power, and their light. And she brings poetry, presence, and deep spiritual clarity to everything that she does. And today, she's here to share her story with you. Chrystal, it's a joy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, I know you have this phenomenal story, and it just goes from childhood to where you are today. So what I would love to do is give you the stage and the microphone and let you jump into that story. And then I look forward to, after that, just kind of jumping into some conversation and some questions that I have for you.
So thank you for that, Brad. I'm so excited to be here. And I'd like to start the story at my childhood, because that was my first real experience of the divine, and really quite unexpected. I grew up in a dysfunctional, functional home, typical American home. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dysfunction in our homes. But my mom was an alcoholic. My dad was absent. And it was a really hard childhood. I mean, I was an adult by the time I was 5. But I'm going to take you to the point in my life when I was between, and I never can remember because it's so many years ago now, it's either like between 10 and 13 when this experience happened. So it was one of those mornings when my mom woke up and she was on the other side of alcohol, which means she had a hangover and she wasn't in a very good place. And I remember there was always a lot of fear. I could hear my mom coming down the hall, and there was 3 of us at the time, 3 siblings, and I never knew who was in trouble. But this particular morning, it was me. And she pulled me out of bed by the hair, took me down the hall, threw me in the kitchen. She pointed to this black spot on the ceiling, which I immediately knew what I had done. She had told me to clean that days ago, but between all of my little girl chores, I hadn't gotten to it. So I didn't say, I didn't try to defend myself. I said, okay, I'm sorry. And I got up and I started cleaning this black spot. And I remember I was so tired. Like I was young, but I was exhausted. Like it was almost as though my soul was tired. And I was having this conversation with God, which, by the way, in our house, God wasn't really welcome. I always make the joke that he was only welcome if he was damned, but that was it. We never really had, I wouldn't say my mom was, she wasn't an atheist. She was more of an agnostic, which is kind of funny because towards the end of her life, she became a minister, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, at this point, she was more of agnostic. And so I had heard the stories about heaven and hell. And as I was cleaning, I was, a deep thinker, because I think that tends to happen when you grow up in an environment like this where you are an adult very young. And I was having this deep conversation with this supposed God that I wondered if exists. And I was saying, if you are real, and I just couldn't come to terms with a God that would make you flawed and imperfect and then punish you for that. That seemed odd to me, just to say. And then I went on to think about people trying to be good to get to heaven. And I also thought that's kind of corrupt. Like, you're going to be good to get something, or are you really a good person? Or the opposite of that, I'm going to be good so that I'm not punished, which is also like I'm trying to be good to get something, well, not to get something, not to be punished. And I realized in that moment, which was my first moment of like true personal self-worth, was that I want to be good because I'm a good person, not to get to heaven, not to avoid hell. And it was like, oh! I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, it was like an awakening for my soul, because it was my first real, like, joyful moment of self-worth where I was like, that's what it means to truly be a good person, just to be good for the sake of being good. So I continued my conversation and I said, well, God, if you are real, then I should be able to know this before I die. Because I also felt like cheating to know that God was real or not real before I died, or after I died. Because after you die, well, of course, you're going to find out, right? We're all going to find out. So I was like, I want to know before. If Moses could like part the Red Seas, then why can't I know you're real? And then the last thing I asked before I actually walked off this counter was, if you are real, which seemed all the more difficult, could you please help my mom stop drinking? And that seemed, I mean, seriously, like the most miraculous thing that could happen. I never believed that could happen because of the state that my mom was in. But anyway, with that thought, I turned around and in a daze, because I was just kind of dazed out thinking about all of these really deep conceptual thoughts and spiritual thoughts for quite a young child, I walked off the counter. And of course, if you walk off a counter, it's like, think about walking into like a swimming pool. The physics of it is that your head goes down and you're basically falling forward. And I remember in that moment, I was falling through a vortex of time and space. It had no sound. It was just this whirling time and space. There was three of me. There was the child, the physical body. There was the soul entity that lived within the body. And there was this all-knowing observer that was quite dispassionate about all of my little girl stories, but that was also me. I, at that time, associated mostly with the entity that lived within the body, which was the soul essence, and was going through this experience. I was kind of in a fetus position, and then all of a sudden I ended up in this serene black night, punctuated by lights, which were off in the distance. And there was this, I can only say, a download of understanding, instant knowledge transmission, that this is time and space. And there's no empty space in the universe. Remember, this is over 35 years ago, before science even caught up with dark matter. There's no empty space in the universe. And those lights, those are stars, and that's what you are. And then, boom, I was back in my body. However, I did not crash into the floor as I should have. I landed, much like a cat, on my feet. And I was just like kind of stunned that I was like, how did I fall? End up here, like standing, looking at the floor. So I figured I must have hit my head, had this really amazing dream, and somehow got up. So I ran to the bathroom. I was looking for a sign of my fall, like any kind of sign, a bruise, a bump, something, nothing. Then I started screaming for my brother. I was like, Mark, God save me. And he was like, what, who? And I told him, no, there was three of me. There was my body. There was the soul entity that lived within my body. There was this all-knowing, they were all me, da, 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 da. And he was like, okay, I think you've lost it. You need a straitjacket. And we both started laughing. We were kids. But after the laughter, I remember telling my brother, never forget. Never forget that this happened. Because the universe kind of instilled within me that if I didn't tell him that, I would someday think it was a dream. So every year I would say, Mark, do you remember? He's like, I remember. And it's kind of interesting, Brad, because what happened is he became a minister. He's still a minister, by the way. And so we have very different philosophical beliefs. Like, he's a very good man and he does really good work on his soul, but he has very different philosophical beliefs, which is kind of almost the opposite of mine. But anyway, he's my witness, which is, I think the universe has a really good sense of humor. At one point, I had to just tell Mark, like, we can't talk about religion because I want to conserve our friendship. And I love you. And I really want to honor your belief system. And, with that, I remember we had almost a really big fight about it one time because he was telling me that the deep, sorrow of his soul was that his sister and my other sister, we were both going to end up in hell. I mean, I'm laughing because I was like, I don't even believe in hell because I believe that it's a loving universe. Not that there's not a consequence to your actions, and that you will end up in the energetic field that you choose, but that's not necessarily hell. And I can go more into that if you'd like, but I can also continue on the story. But anyway, so from that point forward, I asked him not to, and I had a dream, which I've had very prophetic dreams throughout my life. And in this dream, I was shown that religion was a structure, a foundation for my brother. And I have a pretty sharp mind, so I could have had a very deep conversation with him about all the reasons that he shouldn't believe in this angry, jealous God that was going to throw everyone into hell that never heard the name Jesus or had never been saved. But in this dream, I was shown that if I were to convince him of that I would take away the structure and his world would fall apart. And for him, religion is home, it's family, it's a safe place. And so that's when I said, let's never have this conversation again. And I want to honor what you believe to be true, but I also need you to honor what I believe to be true. And I said, and by the way, you can always you can continue to pray for your God to save me. So we're still friends, by the way. We're still friends and we still have very different beliefs because from my experience, God is pure love and we're given free will in this world of choice, contrast, and change to have the experience that would bring our soul the most joy. And that really upsets people sometimes because they say, well, what do you mean joy when my life has been so hard and it's been so tragic and there's been loss and betrayal and disappointment? And how is that part of my joy, of my soul? But the soul longs for expansion. The soul comes to planet Earth. This is a warrior kind of like world because it's a very harsh world because we're veiled from the truth that we are the manifestation of God in a myriad of differentiation, shadow and light, for the absolute bliss of our own existence. But we come for the experience of experience so that we can know what on a soul level we already know, but we want to experience in a visceral way. So continuing on with that story, I moved through this experience of falling off the counter. I never told my parents, of course, because that would have just freaked them out. But I did start calling Sunday school churches and buses to pick me up or walk or make my way to church. And I went to all kinds of different churches because there was this deep longing to know the truth. Because when I was in this out-of-body state, in the serene black night, I felt like a love I can't even express. It was all-encompassing. And I talk about the dispassionate observer, which was also me. So the dispassionate observer, I think, is something that I don't speak a lot. Now, I'll share with you and your listeners because I think it's important. Because I remember I had this poor, pitiful Chrystal story going when I fell off the counter. Poor me. I had these horrible parents and, we lived in poverty and it was a very hard life and I didn't have any self-worth and da-da-da-da. Like this poor, pitiful Chrystal. And I mean, if you look from the outside and the reality of it, it justifiably so, because it was a very hard life. But from my soul perspective, my soul had chosen this experience for various reasons, and the predispositions and the tendencies of my personality and my family, where I resonated most and where I could heal the most and learn the most, and also be of service as a bodhisattva or as a healing force on the planet. So I chose this environment because it brought my soul joy. And you say joy, yeah, I went to school with bald spots and bruises, and the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse was so intense that I was really just kind of shut down, because I just felt like an animal in a corner that had been abused. Just shut down. And I also had to keep up the facade because I went to school and everyone thought I was like the pretty popular girl, and I had to keep up the facade, which was really hard. I always told people that my dad died in Vietnam in the war. That way I was the child of, a hero, not abandoned by a father who didn't want to take care of his family and had drinking problems and so on and so forth. So it was a difficult childhood. So that's why I say it was justifiably so that I had this story. But from the all-knowing observer perspective, it wasn't buying it. Because here's the thing. The all-knowing observer knew a bigger context of Chrystal, not only this life, but many lives, past and future, and knew that this life, this challenging life, which is a dot in the infinite time and space. So think about living, let's say, 100 years, just nothing compared to infinity, right? And I had many lives and bigger context. And so I wasn't buying into the poor, pitiful me. Instead of that, it was like celebrating that I had the opportunity to have these parents and this experience and to dig deeper and to grow and to shine and to hopefully choose love over fear, which is the whole goal of a human life, is to move through all of this and to choose love of your own accord, not because it's going to get you to heaven or avoid hell, which is not exactly what I know to be true. And I'll continue on, with the story so I can get more details on my experience of what heaven and hell is, and I'll take that to the next near-death experience. So anyway, I was baptized 5 times in a bunch of different churches because I didn't feel it. I was like, okay, I like religion because I like the community. And I really liked how sweet and kind they were. Because here was this little girl, coming to church asking to be baptized, and then coming out of the water and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't feel it. I'm still me. Like, where's the love? And maybe I was in the wrong churches. So I would go to a different church. And I was really looking for truth. I read the Bible 7 times, and as a very young individual, it scared me. By this time, I was probably in my teens. And I remember reading it. I decided I would read it from the back to the front, not the front to the back. I don't know why, because I'm strange, probably. It's like, let's read it from the back. Let's go to the end. And I always have this tendency when I read books, I kind of want to peek at the end and see before I start it, which is probably not what you should be doing. But anyway, so I went to the back of the Bible and I read it all the way back to the beginning and then all the way back. And I did this 7 times. And I was really afraid of this God that would test someone by asking them to sacrifice their son to prove their love. I'm like, what kind of God is this? And then at the very minute it's going to stab the son. Then he says, okay, now you're truly enlightened. And I was like, this God is scary. And this is not the love that I felt. So I kind of gave up on religion. And I figured it was me, that I wasn't able to understand, that somehow I wasn't smart enough to understand the truth of this religion or any religion. But by the way, I left home at 17. I was out in the world. I had to take care of myself. So I pushed religion aside. And I just kept living my life. I got married. I had children. It didn't work out, unfortunately. It was like 13 years in, and he wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. Not important, all of the details, but we ended up, getting divorced. And this is when I kind of went back into this place where I started to really question my own existence, because with the divorce, I felt like an imposter, like he had seen the truth, like the little girl that was unworthy that my mom had always pointed to was still hiding there, and he had seen her, and that's the reason he wanted a divorce. And so I had all this like existential drama and trauma that I didn't even know was there, that showed up because of this divorce. And it was just a really hard time. I didn't even date for like a year and a half. I mean, I really wanted not to bring a man into the house with the children. The children were small. They were like 10 and 8 or thereabout at that time. And finally, I remember thinking I really should go out. Like I was just home alone all the time, and that wasn't healthy for me on any level. So I remember I met a nice guy, and he asked me if I would go on a trip with him, a ski trip. And I said, no, 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 I'm not ready for that. And he said, no, I don't mean that. Like, you can just come. I have a spare room. You can even bring a chaperone. Just come. My kids are coming. We'll go skiing. I don't like the cold. I don't like skiing, but I just felt like I should do this. I should go. It's not healthy for me to always be home alone. So anyway, I went on this trip, and then I brought my cousin Carmen with me, who it was a 40-year-old at the time, beautiful doe eyes, soft skin, big lush hair, like Latin woman. She was the clarinetist for the Dallas Opera at the time. And I said, hey, do you want to have a free trip? We'll go skiing. We're going to stay at this nice house. Do you want to come with me? Because I really need to just get out. She said, oh, that sounds great. Let's go. When we got on the trip, I wasn't ready for that. And his children were older children, and they were cussing and drinking and smoking, which, I didn't do any of that. I never have been a drinker. I never did drugs. I was always such a responsible, girl, and always being good. And I was just uncomfortable there. And I don't think that they were enjoying my company either, just to be fair. I told my friend, I was like, I think this is fun and I really appreciate it, but I think I'm ready to go home. I miss my kids, and Carmen needs to go back and practice for her, recital or whatever. And he said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So we were heading back to the airport. Somehow he took a wrong turn, and we ended up going up the mountain instead of down the mountain. And I remember it was icy roads, and he lost control of the car, and we started spinning. And when we started spinning, for me at least, time slowed down to almost the point that it was non-existent. It was no longer linear. It was just now, past, present, future, all in one space. And I remember feeling so much compassion for everyone in the car, because he was like freaking out, like trying to get the car under control. She in the back seat, Carmen we were in a little red Jeep, I had never seen such horror. And I remember just looking back at her and just like, I'm so sorry. Because my reaction to this event was so peaceful, because I've never been afraid of death after falling off the counter when I was a child. I just remember being surprised and thinking, wow, I didn't know I was going to die today. Like, it was a shock. Like, somehow we think we're going to live forever. Not that it's a conscious thought, but an unconscious kind of idea that we're going to live forever. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know I was going to die today. And with that, the car was spinning. We were hit on my side, the passenger side of the car. This car couldn't stop coming down the mountain, going 50 miles an hour, estimated. It hit my side of the door, threw us off this cliff. Ultimately, it was an 80-foot cliff, but we hit at 25 feet and flipped 10 times before we crashed into a wall of ice at the bottom of the mountain. So it was like one of those kind of spectacular events, that you see kind of in the movies, that it's staged, but this was real life. And I remember as soon as we got hit and we were off, that's when I said, oh, wow, I didn't know I was going to die today. And then with that, I was out of my body watching the scene from above. I was suspended in a luminous presence. And if you can imagine, like a light, like a fog, but it's pure light. It was almost like a fog made of light. And this light was a presence that was holding me, that was cradling me, and that was comforting me as I watched my physical body, which seemed like, was in slow motion again, because this was all happening, I'm sure, very quickly, but from my perspective, everything was kind of in slow motion. Meanwhile, simultaneously, I was being shown my entire life in a panoramic, three-dimensional view on the horizontal and vertical plane of existence. So shown backwards, forward, up, and down, like every single aspect of my life, every thought, every kind word, every unkind word, every intention, and every single thought, from the smallest thought, like I want to step on that ant, creates a ripple and a potential timeline. And I was shown like all these different thoughts and how they had created universes. They were all mine, and how they added to the multiverse of the collective. And I was shown how a kind word had saved someone's life, like one kind word, how it had rippled out to somebody trying to commit suicide. And because of that kind word and the ripple, that they did not take their own life. And likewise, I was shown how an unkind word could ripple out to, a man beating his wife or being unkind to his children. And it started with an unkind word that traveled and rippled. And the ripple gets bigger over time. Like it's like a wave, it's like it starts with this little ripple and then. So I was shown basically the importance of our every thought, word, and action. And we are far more powerful than we know. And many times we think about, changing the world in these grand acts of benevolence and moving mountains, when actually it's these small shifts in the compass of our own existence where we're actually moving from a place of love rather than fear, moving outside of the ordinary, because the human condition is typically fear-based, predatorial existence. So it would be moving outside of the norm and doing just something slightly different. And that's what changes the world. So we make the world a better place by being a better person in our own little world. Like when you could be cruel, be kind. When you could abandon, stay. When you could hurt, help. When you have every reason to be mean, do the opposite. And it's these small shifts. I mean, I can't say that I'm always able to do that, but it's always my intention to do that. So I always make the joke that when I leave here, I'll get a big E for effort. And I think that's all we could ever do, is just try. So I'm seeing this panoramic view. And even when I saw the ripple of my less radiant behavior, word, thought, action, I was not being judged, Brad. I was being held and I was being cradled. And I was also being shown that we don't know what we don't know until we know it in the future. And we're given a limited consciousness so that we can have these experiences that are less radiant, so that we can understand them in a more visceral way. And this makes the whole of the universe more empowered and healed, because as we heal ourselves, we heal the world, we heal the universe. In essence, we heal the divine. Of this particular thing that can only be experienced through our particular consciousness, set of circumstances, predispositions, soul choices that we bring in. So it was quite a lot. I mean, if I could say it, is people go, what was it? Was God talking to you? Did you hear a voice? And the truth, it was almost like, and this isn't even a way to explain it, but it was like an instant download of everything in the universe all at once. Like if you were possible to know everything all at once, instant download. You saw everything from every dimension. You knew all the answers. You knew exactly why you existed. You knew the sum total of all. And it was all love. It was all kindness. And it was all benevolence and grace. And that included sorrow. And that included betrayal. And that included hurt and horror and tragedy. All of it was part of this benevolence and grace. And the most beautiful gift that we are given as humans to have the human experience is free will, personal autonomy. And it's a great burden too, because it's a great responsibility, because we can also hurt ourselves and others in ways that are unimaginable. but we can also help. And I think the tipping point on the planet right now is that we're tipping over with more people waking up to the truth of love and the importance of random acts of kindness, even, and how every little conscious thought shifts the compass of our lives, and not only of our lives, but in that ripple, shifting universes. So it was quite a lot. And I was shown three very poignant things that I always like to share because it was just so interesting to me because it was not suspected. The first thing I was shown was because I remember I came from this dysfunctional home. So I was always trying to be good because people grow up, I mean, typically kids that come from these homes, they don't feel good. And they feel like the reason that my mom and dad have these problems is because I was born, because I'm a burden, because I'm not good enough, because I'm not kind enough, because I make too many mistakes. And so you kind of start to take this on as a child. So then it followed me into adulthood, always just being good, 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 But there wasn't a lot of joy in my life. I mean, I was a good mother, I was a good wife, I was a good ex-wife, I was a good friend, good ex-friend. Like I was, but there wasn't a lot of joy. It was just like life almost felt like a heavy burden up to this point of my near death, which I was just talking to a student a minute ago about this, and I'd like to share it with your viewers because it came up. That in an energetic universe, like why would you think that Chrystal Rae would be thrown off of a cliff and fall and have this near-death experience, or other people have like cancers, or be murdered or be raped, or all the horrific things that can happen in life? Like, why is this happening? And what I was shown is that, for example, in my near-death experience, because I had felt like life was such a burden, I almost had an unconscious, unacknowledged death wish. And so I attracted this experience towards me for the opportunity to leave the planet, because I was just not happy. My soul was tired, and I was just like going through the motions of it. I mean, on the outer world, if you'd see me, of course, there was moments of happiness. I had my children, and but there was just this great sorrow in me. And so I was shown the sunrise. It's the first thing I was shown, and it was like this voice, not speaking, and not even like telepathy, but just expressing to me, you have never seen the sun rise or set. And of course, I was like 35 years old at this time, and I'd seen many sunrises. But what I was shown, when I was shown, it was like this vision of the sun rising, and imagine this, like flowers blossoming and birds singing and skies opening and children opening their eyes, and life, like a sunrise, what it means, like the metaphor of like being alive and new beginnings, right? Because every, metaphorically, the sun rising, we have a new beginning. And then the sun setting, and the letting go of the day, and the letting go of the success and the failure, and just going back into this place of peace and rest, and then for that cycle to begin that I had never really appreciated. Now, as I drive down the road, I'm always like in awe of the sunrise or in awe of the sunset. Like it's my favorite part of the day. So first I was shown that, and then I was shown the earthiness of freshly cut grass. Like, somebody mowing their lawn, and that smell of freshly cut grass, the earthiness of that. And it was so curious to me that was something shown to me. And I think the metaphor of this was that Gaia, Mother Earth, like we are, everything that we are is born of Earth. Like we breathe in the oxygen of Mother Earth. We eat from the minerals and the plants and the animals of Mother Earth. And we're sustained by our shelters that are made of Mother Earth. Everything is Earth, including our bodies, which is an expression of Mother. It's like Mother Earth coming to life through each one of us. And so this earthy smell of freshly cut grass reminded me that I am born of this planet, of this beautiful Gaia, this Earth, which is a creation of the divine, right? And then lastly, and I think most important for human connection, was that I was shown that I had never, one of the greatest gifts of a human life is touch, and that I had never reached out and touched anyone. Like I had never really truly embraced anyone. So of course, I had 2 children. I had touched people in my life, but I had never really touched someone in a conscious way, in the gift of like of physical contact. And so now, I mean, in my life, I realize the exquisite power. And I always like to talk about after World War II, there was um, this tragedy that happened because many mothers were lost in the war, and then all these babies were put in cribs and in nurseries, but the nurses couldn't cradle them. They couldn't. They were sustaining them, giving them food and changing their diapers, but there was not a lot. It was just too many, and so these babies were dying, and they were not dying from starvation. They were not dying from lack of water or lack of sleep or lack of care. They were dying from lack of physical contact. And I think this is a really important point, especially in our world today, where we are less likely to touch one another in a meaningful way. If you meet me, you're going to get a hug. Like, that's who I am. Even people who are like not huggers, that kind of like do this. I'm like, it's okay. I'm going to hug you anyway, because I realized how important it is. After that, I mean, I was not in a relationship for quite some time, and I realized that I was one of those people that wasn't being touched. So one of the things that I recommend for people that are out of relationship or don't have a lot of physical contact is to get some kind of body work done, whether it's massage or, join a yoga class where you're getting physical adjustments, and get that physical. I was getting 2 massages a week because I just really needed human contact, and I didn't realize that. And I needed to also ground myself, get my feet in the grass and hug trees. And I guess I became a tree hugger because it's part of Gaia. But I realized what a gift it is in this form, in this body, that we get to reach out and touch each other, and touch can be quite healing, and necessary, truthfully. So, and there's some societies where they're so, they don't touch at all, and they don't tend to live as long, their longevity. But anyway, moving on. So those 3 things I was shown, and then all of this is happening while I'm spiraling down the mountain, watching myself above, being cradled, being held in this luminous presence, this luminous light, and this fog expression. And then the last thing I thought was, oh, it's too late for me, because I was shown like, I've been a good girl, I've been a good this and good that, but I had no joy. And one of the things that I was shown after the 3 different things of being shown, the sunrise, the sunset, the freshly cut grass, and the ability to hug, was that we have different timelines here on planet Earth. And what I mean by that is, like, when you go to like a psychic reading, what they're reading is the timeline that you're on. But imagine that you have your timeline here in the middle, and you have more radiant expressions of self on this side and less radiant on this side. And that's just conceptual, because there's no judgment, all right? There's just different paths. Some are more shadowed, some are brighter. But what that medium or a person that's a psychic ability would be reading was the energy line that you're on. But all timelines are already in completion. In other words, there's nothing new in the universe. Every possibility has already been played out. What we get to experience is what we resonate with. So what we're resonating with right now is our experience that we are experiencing right now. So if we shift slightly, let's say to a more radiant expression of self, then we would have a different experience that's a little bit more radiant. And most of the time we can't jump super far into timelines. We're pretty much stuck with the ones that are closest by us, or unless we're thrown like out of our body in a near-death experience, or maybe in a sickness or something that would promote your growth, exponentially promote your growth in a quicker way. Or just intelligence of knowing this is something that you now understand, and you know that it does matter, that shift in the compass, that choice to stay rather than leave, or to leave rather than stay, or to be kind rather than be cruel, or to be cruel rather than be kind. Like, all these things change universes, not only yours, but many, many people's universes. In my near-death panoramic view, I was shown a woman. They said to me, this always makes me a little emotional. They said to me, do you want to see one of the most radiant things that you've done in your life? And you would think, like the most important thing you've done in your life, graduating cum laude or buying the house or the car, or doing something. But no, I was shown this woman that I remember meeting sitting on a bench, on a city bench, and she just had her head in her hands, and she looked so forlorn. And I think she was pregnant too. I think she had a little pregnant belly. And I remember just being drawn over to this woman, and I sat down with her, and I was like, are you okay? And she was, of course, disturbed that I had sat down. And then she said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just having a really bad day. And she went on to explain that this, that, the other, whatever was going on in her life, that was tragic, by the way. And she was so sad. And I said, well, I'm sorry you're going through that. And can I give you a hug? And I'm sending you love. And I think I had a few dollars in my pocket, and I was like, here's some money. Can you take this and do, and don't lose hope, and it'll get better. And then I just said, I'll pray for you tonight. I'll bring you into my meditation. And I never saw this woman again. Like, that was it. And this is like the most radiant expression of Chrystal Rae up to that point. And then I was shown the ripple of my kindness. I was shown backwards in time. She had been planning on taking her own life. And because I sat down and I talked to her, she was asking, ooh, it made me cry. She was asking God for a sign. And I was that sign for that day. And I changed her trajectory, and I was shown her future, where she had the baby, took care of her other child, and she started working at a shelter and helping others and giving back, and her life turned out fine. She found the love of her life. And anyway, it was just a crazy story that was forgotten in my consciousness, and it was just a passing by of a stranger, and I was just happy to do it. But that was one of the most important things I had done on my soul journey. And that takes courage. I think it's easy to get cold and hard, especially in a world that we live in. And so it takes a lot of courage and bravery to be the one to reach out and to try and help. I mean, there's predators out there, and there's bad stuff that happens, but there's also the opportunity to love and to help, and of course use discernment in all of this. I'm not saying, just blanketly do things that are unsafe for yourself, but you'll know because your soul will guide you. So fast forward, I'm still falling through time and space, right? And I'm seeing all of these experiences, and I was shown I had little joy in my life. Like, I had been doing all the right things, the good things, good girl, but there was no joy. And then I was shown a timeline where I could exit the planet. Like, we get to choose. I think I told you that, we attract things to us, whether it's an accident or a disease or a tragedy, something, right, where we can leave the planet. And that happens. I think it's an energy. And I think I was so sad in my life because my childhood was so hard. My marriage was hard. I was lonely, and I was alone, and I felt unworthy, and I felt like I was an imposter, and I wasn't good enough, and all the stuff. So it was just this kind of facade life, because from the outside, everyone looked at me and said, well, she's perfect. Everything's perfect for her. And then they had no idea of the great sorrow and loneliness within me. So this divine presence showed me, you can leave the planet. You can come home, basically. You can go back to God. And I was like, I can't do that. I have 2 children I have to take care of. And instantly I was shown my 2 children at my funeral, crying and missing their mother. But then I was shown the rest of their life, which they went to college, they got married, they had children. They were fine without their mom. And this divine presence told me, again, not without words, but with an understanding, that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence. And it said to me, and that means you, Chrystal, which I was shocked about. I was like, what? I'm here for bliss. My life had been anything but blissful. It had been a heavy burden. And he said, if you want to come home, you can come home. And didn't use those words, but this was an understanding that I was given. And I was shown many other timelines also, Brad. I was shown I could come back and have some physical ailments, like being in a wheelchair or mental disabilities. And there were so many timelines I can't even explain to you. But there was this one timeline that I loved. And that was where I ended up sitting here with you, Brad. And by the way, that was where I wrote a book, and I opened yoga studios, and I did art, and I did all these things. But basically, this divine presence said, the most radiant possibility for you is to go back and tell the world, write a book, and tell the world that love is all that matters. And I was so excited about that. That lit up my soul. I was like, that's amazing. I get to do that. I can go back and tell the world that love is all that matters. And it's yes, you get to do that and write a book. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was and in your book, be sure and put, and this is verbatim, that sound and light are the future of medicine. And this is 35 years ago. Now there's all kinds of studies on sound and light and the healing qualities of sound. And there's Dr. Emoto's work, and there's work on lasers. Do you know that they've already sent a laser out so fast and come back so fast that it came back before it left, which means time travel. So the qualities of light, I saw recently there's these red glasses that people are wearing because apparently light is one of the most important things for our health. And there's all this light pollution happening. But anyway, not to digress, but sound and light is the future of medicine. Put that in your book. And so I was all right, I'll put that in my book. And with that, then I was oh, but I'm falling off this cliff and it's 80 feet and I'm slamming into a wall of ice. And so I guess I'm not going to write the book. I guess this is what's going to happen. So I'm going to die, because it didn't enter my human capacity to understand that you could be hit by a car going 50 miles an hour on your side of the car, fly off a cliff, hit at 25 feet, flip 10 times, head over heel, head over heel, head over heel, and somehow survive that and come out of that and write a book. I was that's all good and well, but that's hard to believe that that's going to happen. So, my thought was, I guess it's too late for me. I remember thinking, oh, that sounds wonderful, but it's too late for me because I'm already off the cliff. It's the gun has already shot, the poison has already been taken, it's too late. And I remember thinking, oh, well, because I'm not afraid of death, when everyone was freaking out in the car, and I was just oh, I didn't know I was going to die today. And then at this point, when I was slamming into the wall of ice, I said, oh, I guess I'm going back into the light. And truthfully, there was a part of me that was excited about that possibility of just going back into the light. So I guess that's when I lost consciousness. And when I came back into physical awareness, I was at the bottom of this cliff in an upside down Jeep with the wheels spinning wildly and the headlights into the falling snow. And I remember just kind of being shocked, who survives that? How did that happen? It's kind of falling off that counter and landing on my feet. I feel I am a cat. That was another one of my lives, And I remember looking over at the guy that was driving, and he was covered in blood, but he said he was fine. And then I was looking for Carmen, which couldn't be found. So I was Carmen, Carmen, Carmen. But anyway, she wasn't responding. I couldn't see her. It was dark. And I was so excited to see my children again. So I remember climbing out this window. I said, I'm going to go get help. And I remember climbing out this window, and I was so excited to be alive, in a way that I had never experienced life before, because it was I was given a second chance to not be good. I don't have to be good. I get to be a mother. I get to be a friend. I get to fail. I get to succeed. I get to see the sunrise. I get to smell the earth. I get to do all these things. It was no longer I have to do this. I saw that my children would be fine without me. So that means I get to be their mother. I get to have this experience with them. I don't have to do it. And anyway, so I climbed up this cliff to the top, and which, by the way, some muscles, that's an 80-foot cliff. in the cold, which I don't like the cold at all. And I'm kind of a girly girl, if you don't know. So like, but I'm strong. I'm really, really strong. I mean, I can still at 64 years old walk on my hands, put my foot behind my head, and I can out push up almost every single man. So I'm really strong. And I think this is kind of like this soul, like fierceness that was just born into me. But anyway, so I made my way up the cliff, and I got to the top, and everybody was like, "What happened? Is there more people?" I'm like, "Yes, there's a Jeep down there. There's 2 more people. We need help." Da 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 da. And this is when it gets kind of groovy, like kind of quick, because all of a sudden it was as though another realm opened up or a door opened up, and I was able to. And it wasn't something I was trying to do, but I was able to know everyone's thoughts and feelings. If you touched me, I know, right away when I say that, people always kind of like pull their thoughts in. I'm, whoa. But if you touched me, I knew everything, and it was overwhelming. And I saw right away, I saw that there was a man with black boots, probably a fireman, who was going to steal my purse, which was freaking me out because my money, my tickets, my plane trip home was in that purse, and I wanted to go home. I was so excited to go see my children and to be alive. And I kept begging for someone. I couldn't force myself to go back down there. I kept begging for someone to please bring my purse, which never showed up, by the way. So I found myself in the emergency room. They took Carmen. I think she was air flighted, but I'm not sure because it was all such a shock. And I'm not sure how she got there, but I believe I was in an ambulance. That's how I got there. I remember walking in, though, into the emergency room, and it was just a bunch of chaos because Carmen was being pulled in on a stretcher. By the way, she was the one that got the brunt of the injuries because she was in the back seat of this little Jeep and had the roll bar. So as we were going, she was hitting her head here, and then she was hitting her head here, and then she was hitting her head here, and done. So she broke every bone in her face, and she had 80% brain damage, or maybe it was 90. I can't remember now. But anyway, she had brain damage. But at this point, they didn't know what had happened to Carmen. She was being pulled in on a gurney, and this nurse, male nurse, grabbed my arm and told me, or said, "Were you drinking?" And I said, "No, I don't drink. We were not drinking." He said, "Well, your cousin has so many injuries. She's probably not going to survive. Somebody came in yesterday, half the injuries, and they're dead. And if you guys are drinking, that's manslaughter." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And I ran into where Carmen was on the gurney, surrounded by a bunch of nurses and doctors. And I just put my hand on her leg. And when I did, I felt this bolt of lightning, that's all I can say, go through my crown of my head, out my hand, and ripple through her body. And I was like, oh, she's going to be okay. Like I knew instantly she was going to be okay. No matter what they said to me, I knew Carmen was going to be okay. That same nurse grabbed my arm, the male nurse, and when he did, I saw that he had been abusive to his significant other, his wife or girlfriend, whoever she was. He'd been beating on this woman. I saw her fear. I saw her screaming, begging for him to stop, and him in a rage. And I was freaking out because I was like, this is TMI, right? There's too much information, and I didn't want to know this information. I was sensory overload. All of a sudden, the lights every sound was like magnified. The lights my eyes were, I couldn't take it. And the sounds, and then this man touching me, and like every single thought from the beginning of his birth, being abused as a child, and how that translated out to his life. And it was just, I ran to the bathroom, and I was like, whoa, like just nobody touched me. And I was just shaking in the corner. And I'm not sure how long I was in there, but eventually somebody came in and said, "You have to come out. We need to check your neck." Because I had told them my neck was hurting. And I said, "I'll come out as long as that nurse is nowhere to be seen." And so this nice woman, nurse, took me out, and they took me to have my neck x-rayed. And again, this is very groovy, interesting, powerful part of the story because they took the first x-ray and they said, "Oh, we're sorry to tell you, but your neck is broken." And I was like, "Oh, no." No. That was not on my timeline. I'm here to write a book. And I went like this, and I felt that same bolt of like radiant energy just coming through my hand. It was like heat on my neck. I said, you need to retake that radiograph, x-ray. And so they took a second one, no break, no break. Third one, no break. Fourth, x-ray, no break in my neck. And they were like, but wait, you see the break here and there's no break here. And I said, no, it's not on my timeline. That's not part of my timeline. So they made me sign. And by the way, I think just to be clear why that happened is that it was a close second to one of the things I had chosen for my life, on my timelines. So again, nothing is set, even though they said this is what's going to happen, with a slight shift of the compass. When you shift a compass, it's ever so slight, but you end up in an entirely new land, right? And it's a small movement, which is one of my favorite analogies because it really emulates what is true for us in the human condition. So I said, no, that's not in my timeline. It's close, but that's not it. It's like almost pregnant, but not pregnant. Right? So anyway, they let me sign off my rights. In other words, if your neck's broken, we're sorry. We're not responsible. You can go home. Although I did not have a broken neck, I did have a severe case of whiplash. I mean, for the next year, I was like turning like this. I could not turn my neck. So, which is what brought me to yoga, by the way. So everything and divinity are working together. I found a really nice chiropractor who I worked with for a year. And he said, Chrystal, if you would just do yoga, you could heal your own neck. And I'm like, yoga? Isn't that like what people do when they don't want to exercise? I had no idea like what yoga is, like true yoga. It's like a very intense, can be a very intense workout. But anyway, not to digress, moving on. So I go home. Well, part of the story that I think is kind of sweet and a little bit, it was humiliating for me at the time. So I had been on this first trip, right? The first time I'm dating, been divorced for a year and a half, and I have no money. So guess what? I have to call the kid's dad and ask him to save me. I'm like, I had a horrible car wreck. They said, Carmen's about to die. I have no money. Can you help? So he did, which I'm forever grateful. He's actually been one of my most important soulmates, even though the marriage didn't work out. I have to say that I'm so grateful for him and for his love and care of my soul. I mean, he's remarried and there's nothing romantic going on there at all, but I'll always be grateful for his radiant soul. So I get home, and first of all, I see my kids at the airport when I get off the plane. They come running towards me, and that embrace, like, I will never forget, because it was like, in that moment when I was going off the cliffs, I thought I will not see my kids again. And I don't know, like when we leave our kids, it's always, or people that we love, like just to think about that might be the last time you see them. And so make sure that you leave them in the way that you would like to leave them if you never saw them again, And so I got to see my children again. But this whole experience was just shocking to my central nervous system. I couldn't be outside. The light was too bright. The noises were too loud. I was feeling everyone's fear. There's so much fear inside of people. It was overwhelming. I saw auras around people. I didn't even have like verbiage for any of this because I wasn't the kind of girl that was groovy or hanging out, getting my cards read or any of this. I was a serious-minded woman because my childhood had made me so serious and, an intellectual and a hard worker, and I was modeling and I was taking care of myself from a very young age. And I really just didn't have a context for all of this. So I didn't even know what was happening to me. So I stayed in my bedroom and the shades down for about 2 weeks. And then I was like, I have children. I have to pull myself together for my kids. So I eventually got out of my bedroom and I started to like find ways to be in the light, to deal with the noise, and to kind of shut that veil off of like knowing everyone's thoughts and feelings. I learned how to kind of stop that because it felt invasive to me. I didn't want to, and I felt like it was not fair to the people. They probably didn't want to share all that information with me. So just unconsciously. So I kind of learned how to navigate through that space. And then it was about 2 weeks out from the car wreck when I went to see Carmen in the hospital. She was in the recovery hospital. And again, this is where the story gets kind of really groovy and interesting, and unsuspected, because I certainly didn't know this was going to happen. So I walked into Carmen's room, and first of all, I mean, I knew she had taken the brunt of the injuries, but Carmen was this gorgeous, like radiant beauty, talented, smart. And when I walked in there, it was, if you've ever seen someone who'd been in a really bad car wreck, like she was bloated and she broke every bone in her face and she had rubber bands for her teeth and her eye sockets were broken and she was just, and she was in a coma. Her mom was there and she was kind of scowling at me, her parents and the family, because I was the one who invited her on the trip and it was my friend who was driving. They were not happy with me. It was kind of sort of my fault. I get it, no judgment. But I walked in and I remember seeing her and I was quite frightened by what I saw laying on the bed. And I calmed myself down. I said, Chrystal, this is your cousin and you love her. And I remember just saying that to myself. You love her. It's not about the body. This is your cousin and you love her. So I walked over to her and this is where it gets surprising. I put my hand on her and she opened her eyes. And I was like, and she kind of gave me this little smile, freaked out her mother, the doctors, the nurse, and she sat up and she insisted on getting out of bed and she hobbled over to me and she said, and this I will forever be grateful because it affirmed what I had been looking for as a child, which was proof before you die that there is a God. She said, Chrystal, I'm in the light. I'm gleaming. I've never been so radiant. I'm a star. And I knew that was a message that referred back to my childhood when I was in this omnipresent experience, when I fell out of my body off the counter. I ended up in the serene night, punctuated by light, and this divine presence told me there's no empty space in the universe. Everything is connected. Those lights punctuated are stars, and that's what you are. And so for her to tell me, Chrystal, I'm gleaming. I've never been so radiant. I'm a star. I knew exactly what she was talking about because I had seen the stars and I knew what that meant. And it was an affirmation for me from the divine universe and via this loving woman who took the brunt of all these injuries and delivered this message to me. And of course, her doctor said brain damage, and the mother was like, and then I left and I was really happy about this message. It was just so encouraging to my soul, and I knew exactly what it meant. It was one of those affirmations in your life that God is real. I mean, the possibility of her saying, I am a star, or even opening her eyes, or even coming out of coma, or even being able to like hobble over with her little IV in her hand is astronomical against the odds of any of that happening. So I came back to see her again, which her mom was not happy about. I think that her mom thought I was doing some kind of poltergeist or something, which, she's Catholic and she this was frightening to her. So I came in again. I put my hand on Carmen again and she sat up in bed again, out of coma. And she said that she had many things that she told me, one of which she said there was 3 beings of light around her that were her guardian angels that had been with her throughout all time and space and loved her unconditionally, and that were never going to leave her side. And then she said something like, don't forget to put in your book, Sound and Light is the Future of Medicine. I was like, okay, which was another affirmation from what I had heard when I was in that radiant presence. And then the third time that I came to see Carmen, her mother was like, you're not allowed here anymore. They basically shut me out and told the nursing staff that I wasn't invited there anymore, that it wasn't good for Carmen's mental health or whatever. So, I mean, that was sad. But so I lost contact with her for many years. And of recent, like maybe a year and a half ago, when I decided to publish the book, then I wanted to get more of the details because at that time, it was such a blur, so much energy, such shock that I didn't even remember the year of it. And by the way, I was shown that time is not linear. And since this, I put on my watch, but I never ever have it set, because time really means nothing to me. I like watches, I think they're pretty, but I don't ever, and I'm not sensitive to time in the way that most people are. And I always feel like I'm in the eternal now, 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 now. And so after that, I didn't get to see Carmen for so many years, and I didn't know what year even the accident had happened, and I didn't follow it, and so I met up with her, and interesting story, and just for those of you worried about Carmen, rightfully so, she did have a hard time for sure. She had 18 operations on her face. However, though she wasn't the radiant beauty that she was before, she was still a really beautiful woman. It enhanced her intelligence. It enhanced her musical abilities. She became the lead clarinetist for the Dallas Opera. And she met the love of her life. The only ill effect of her brain damage, which was quite intense, was that she couldn't remember 10 years of being married to two, not one, but two alcoholic husbands. So she couldn't remember any of that. So there is a God in the universe for sure. But she could remember everything else. It enhanced her musical ability. She got married to the love of her life, who was also like a music aficionado. They opened up like a real estate company together. And I think for Carmen, I remember at one point that she had said that, she came out of that feeling that, life is unfair and bad stuff happens to you. And that was kind of where she had landed until later on in her life when she had a little more clarity, which is understandable. No judgment on that, because I can only imagine all the pain and suffering that she went through in those years of operations and healing and all that stuff.
But it's possible, like all of us, we go into our pre-life planning and we, create these maps. We do have free will along the way, and it sounds like we have some choice. It's interesting that when you were back, they gave you several choices and they played those out. This one, you're going to die, and this one, this, and so forth. In fact, if you do die, this is what your children's lives will be like if that happens. And it sounds like then you did see a life where you did live, and you didn't really have very many injuries. And you're going to be writing a book and helping not only yourself, but many other people.
Correct. That's exactly what I saw, that I would come back, write this book. It would take me quite some time to heal, because when I came back, I was really shocked by this whole experience. I didn't know. I had to like. I then started to feel insecure about how am I going to write a book about love when I'm the most unloved and unworthy. Like it's like asking Cinderella to write a book on love. Like how? Like so I went on a mission to heal myself, to heal my childhood wounds, to heal that part of me that felt unworthy, and to really explore what it really meant, and to kind of unravel the love that I had felt and the presence I had been in, which was this luminous, like unfathomable love that can't be measured. That how could I explain this love in a way that people could understand it? It was just shocking to me. Like I felt unworthy, and then the universe kept showing me that this is what you're supposed to do. And I remember my former husband, and I told him, I said, I want to go back to school because I want to write a book about my experience and tell the world that love is all that matters. And he was on the board of UTD, which is the University of Texas at Dallas. And he said, oh, I'll help you get in there. So it was an interesting story. I was driving by the university and my son was in the car. And I told my son, I said, I really want to go take some writing classes because I'm supposed to write this book. And I feel like I should at least know the rules before I break them. Because of course I'm going to break them because I'm sort of a rule breaker. But I need to know the rules before I break them. And my son's like, pull over, Mom, pull over. Go there now. Don't pull over. And so I parked and he said, let's just go ask somebody. Well, that day was registration day. Like that's when they were doing the registration for school. And I was like, so then I called his dad, and then he said, literally the next day, day 2, after we drove by there, I was sitting in class. And the first thing that the professor, one of my favorite favorite professors is a guy named Frederick Turner, who's now passed away, but was a big influence in my life. The first thing he said is that scientists have discovered that there's no empty space in the universe, and there's this thing called dark matter. This is my first day in college, and this is referencing what I was shown as a child. And so, like, the universe just keeps affirming to me that. And then, I decided that I would take a bunch of classes on writing and poetry, and I love to read. And so, anyway, I was making straight A's, but I was just taking non-degree seeking. And then all of the teachers became my friends because I was like 35 and in college. So I was the age of the teachers, basically. And they said, one of my favorite teachers also, he was the dean of psychology. And he said, Chrystal, you should just get your degree. And I was like, that would include math. I don't like math. He said, just take some elementary math classes and then take a few math classes and get it. Anyway, I ended up making straight A's in college, except for one B, and I call it in statistics. I'm dyslexic, so I always flip numbers, so math was always challenging. Because back in my time, dyslexia wasn't a thing. Like now people know what it is, but back then I was just like, I have a hard time doing summations because I'm adding it, but I'm seeing an 8 instead of a 3, or a 5 instead of a 2, or whatever it was, or your mind moves so quickly that you gloss over things. But anyway, so I ended up graduating cum laude, magna cum laude, and I had a thesis. To graduate, you had to do a thesis. So I wrote a book, and I thought this was the book, but it actually was not. It was a book it was juxtaposed of this, now 35, 40-year-old woman, and reliving the childhood that I had lived, which was really a dark time. Seeing little Chrystal in the corner crying, and then coming to this 35-year-old woman and asking, how did that serve you? And so there was a lot of healing, healing came from writing the book and different things. But I ultimately decided not to publish the book, although I did get excellent reviews on the book in college. But because it was so dark, and I made a decision very early that I didn't want to pull anyone into the darkness. I really wanted to write a book that was the book that I could never find. And the book that I wrote, called Love Letters to Your Soul, the way that it's formatted is that any page you turn to, you will find a message for your soul. You will find a warm embrace. You will find someone who loves you. And there'll be no dogma. There'll be no rituals. There'll be no, good or bad. There'll just be unconditional love, wisdom, and guidance. And that's what I wrote. That's the book that I wanted to write. One of the most important things that I learned along the way came from an Indian sage named Ramana Maharishi, who wrote this little book called Who Am I? And in that book, one of his disciples asked him, Master, what is love? And he said, without even pausing, he said, love is the pure light of undifferentiated consciousness. And that one sentence, Rod, changed my life, because I knew immediately that I had the answer to what true love is, and that this kind of love, they in college they tell you agape and different kinds of love, but this love that he was talking about encompassed all types of love. It's the pure light of undifferentiated consciousness. And what that means, if you unravel it, is like, and again, reference back to we are stars. And what is a star? Pure energy. So love is a light. It's pure radiance, right? But it's undifferentiated. In other words, there's no opposites. There's no good. There's no bad. It's pure, like untarnished, non-differentiated consciousness. In other words, this light, this radiance is aware. It's conscious. And that's what love is. That's what you are. That's what I am. That's what we are. That's what the universe is. And that's what God is.
And it sounds like the undifferentiated part means it has no judgment.
Exactly.
It just is.
Exactly. So it's like in our world we have this is good and that's bad, and of course that's relative, because in some other worlds, like other cultures, for example, bowing is what you should do, right? But here, if you bow, it's like strange, right? So what happens with judgments is that we all have our cultural bias, our personal bias, our understanding, our intelligence. But in the light of love, it's all burned to the fire of love until only love is left without any description, any definition. There's no way to describe something so pure, so radiant. Even to say that would be to like dim it down.
Oh, yes. Now, I have a question about the experience you had during the NDE. A couple of things. First, you said you had sort of a message, you were a messenger from God, and God gave you this instant download, and you just had all the answers to all the questions could ever be. Now, on the other side, you had the capacity to hold and maintain and relate to all that. And certainly all that isn't going to fit into the little bodies that we carry in this world here. So you could only bring back so much. And it does feel like you may have brought back a few things, and also the notion of touching and healing. Is that still with you now?
So there's a lot that I brought back with me. As far as touching and healing, I think we're all healers. And yes, I think my presence is healing, my words, my voice. I think absolutely touch, but I also think because we are vibration, just hearing, that's why I really like, I did my own book in Audible version because I feel like there's a radiance of healing that resonates through sound. Um, and the ability to touch and move energy through the bodies for sure. I mean, it can be very healing and it can also hurt, right? So it's not good to hug somebody who has ill will towards you, let's put it that way, or touch them because it's transferred to you. Or even have you ever walked into a room and there's been like a fight or a murder or something awful happen, and you walk in, and even if you didn't know, there you feel it? Have you ever had that experience? Like or walk into someone's house even, and different people's homes have different vibrational feelings. Like some homes you walk in, you feel warm, and it has nothing to do with the decor. It's just this feeling of warm and embrace. And other people you walk in, it feels cold and sad or even angry, or like there's just no love in there. You know what I mean? And the plants are dying, because I mean, literally plants are an expression of the love that we have. And if you're in a low vibrational state, you will actually pull energy from plants. And that's when people say, I can't grow a plant, is because they're at it's not that they're bad people, it is they're at so low vibration that they're pulling energy from everyone and anyone that they can. And this is why people will tend to avoid them, because we feel that, so yes, there is a giving and a receiving and energy in every interaction. And we're all healers. And we're all takers too, and sometimes in our lives.
Well, that's good. Yes, because everything is energy. And so we are emitting it all the time, and ripples, are affecting folks. And so it's rippling at us also all the time. It's interesting when you think about that and you think of the five senses. When you were on the other side also, it seems like you had triggered three of those. You said the notion of seeing the sunset and sunrise, and then the notion of smelling, the fresh cut grass, and then the importance of touch and, for real, substantive touch. You didn't have hearing or tasting in any of those lessons. It was just those three primarily.
And I think it's because that's what would resonate with my particular soul, and what things that I also was meant to share, that the most important things that I could share with people who would be in the space of receiving this healing story. But I do think that there is something to be said about taste and sound, of course. Sound, even somebody who can't hear can receive the vibration healing of sound.
Very true. Well, hey, I have this next section that I call Heart's First Whisper. And it's questions that I have prepackaged for you, and it gives you an opportunity to use your heart to just rapid fire answer, thoughts and feelings aside. How does that sound?
Perfect. I'm happy to do that. That's exciting.
Excellent. Well, here they come. All right, number one. At the kitchen counter, how did I am good feel in your body, and how has it guided you since?
That was the most radiant feeling of self-worth. That was my first experience of self-worth. And it was like I told you earlier, it was like, oh, that's the only way I can explain it. It was like, what? Because I had been, told for my whole life that I was worthless and useless and not good enough and not smart enough and not pretty enough and not this enough and not that enough. And so this In this moment, I realized because I want to be good, not to get to heaven, not to avoid hell, that means I am good. And it was like solidifying something deep down in my soul that I needed to know.
And that's interesting because if you got that message from inside, you might have learned at an early age to not look outside for these messages, but to look inside to get the real truth.
Yeah. I didn't really think about that at that point, I'm telling you, because I was just a little kid, but I know that it was something that I carried with me for the rest of my life. And anytime that somebody would say something derogatory about me, my parents or teachers or whatever, a friend that I had disappointed or something, I would always know in my heart, like, I'm a good person. And I knew that I'm a good person. I know that I do bad stuff, but I never want to hurt. I always say, I remember my former husband, he's like, you're so good at forgiving yourself, Chrystal. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't ever want to hurt. Now, do I fail? I'm human. I have hurt, but I'm human. But my heart is that I don't want to hurt. And so I'm making an effort. And I think that's all we can ever do.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yep. And that you can love yourself and not have it be contingent on anything. And so I think that's great. And that kind of goes right into number 2, which is in that moment, in your 3 of me, body, soul, and observer, who are you most today and why?
I think today I'm actually probably more connected to the observer. Although I would have to say that includes the other two. Because the omnipresent, dispassionate observer is who we really are. The soul entity is like a differentiated particle of light that's veiled to the truth, utilizing the body as a vehicle of the soul. But the body is just almost like a pet, really. It's just lovely. I love my body, but it's not me. And this soul entity is like a spark of light. It's like a, a drop of water, believing that it's the entirety of the universe, not knowing that it's part of a bigger ocean. And so the observer would be the ocean. It would be the oceans of consciousness where you recognize that you are connected to all beings, all things, and there is no differentiation or separation, and that we're all one. So I would have to say the observer.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with that. I think it's a great answer. The notion of the body, if we get caught up in that, we just get caught up in our little matrix world that we're in right here. The soul is that actually animates it and hopefully inspires it and stuff. But the interesting thing is, and the question for a lot of people is, can you actually take yourself and put yourself up in the corner of the room and observe what it is that your body is doing and saying and experiencing as the observer? And if you are, you can be impartial, as opposed to taking anything personal.
Well, we are human, so we're meant to have the human experience. So even from taking, let's say somebody insults you, and somebody that you care about insults you, no matter how far along you are on the path, and the human expression of self is going to feel that dagger, let's just say that. But at the same time, it's going to know that that's not the truth. But it's the truth in that particular experience. So it's not that you're never going to, I think this is like a big misconception in the spiritual community, is that because I'm enlightened, because I've had the spiritual transformative experience, because I know more than most and I have more experiences with the divine than most, that somehow I'm not going to suffer, I'm not going to feel my pain. Actually, I would say from my perspective, the opposite is actually true. The opposite being that because you are aware that you are aware, and you're no longer filtering, that you allow yourself to feel all of your pain, cry all of your tears, enjoy all of your laughter, feel all of your joy, from this perspective of like, this is what it means to be human, and this is why I'm here. Let me use this as fuel for the fire of my soul on the path back to God.
Very good. Right. Yes. So you can actually experience the whole thing and feel the pain, but suffering long term might be more of a choice than an experience. So if you do let the pain wash over you and choose not to have long term suffering, then you probably got the lesson you came to learn. There's a book called The 4 Agreements, and one of those 4 agreements is take nothing personally. And I know there's a lot of things in life that trigger you, and once you kind of examine that trigger and kind of break it open, sometimes you move beyond that trigger. And so you might have 100 of them, and over the course of your life, you whittle away and try to get fewer that are actually still popping through.
I think what happens with this trigger business, I'd like to touch on that. Again, I think this is kind of a spiritual bypass many times in the spiritual community where, you know, it is personal because it's your life, but it's not the definition of you. So the difference is that your response is different. For example, I was walking down the street in New York City, and there was this woman on drugs. This is 20 something years ago, 30 years ago. She had all the tracks on her arms. She had matted hair. She smelled bad. And she was calling me horrendous names, every foul word that you could imagine. And I remember looking at her and thinking, just compassion. I'm so sorry. Whatever brought you to this point in your life. But it didn't, and I'm still carrying her with me 35 years later because it was so shocking and it was so sad to see her life. I literally saw her. So if I bring someone into my existence, it's going to trigger something in me. That means it's in me. And until it's no longer in me, then it will still be triggered. Now, let's say one of my good friends insults me. It's going to trigger because it's going to hurt because I have love for them. I have a relationship with them. I feel betrayed. It's going to take me back to my childhood. Those triggers are still there. Even though I'm aware that that's not the truth of my existence, I kind of like being human. And I can say that hurt. That's not the definition of me. And maybe I need better boundaries or whatever the case may be. But in that moment, it's actually fuel for the fire. It's like a seed. It's a gift. And I talk about this in my book, Brad, about soulmates and agitators. So people think about soulmates as being that person who brings you light, that comforts you, that helps you along the way, but they don't recognize that perhaps the most powerful soulmate you have is the one that hurts you the most. And we're trying to avoid being triggered and avoid this and avoid that when in fact, it's like, let me feel all of my pain. Let me feel all of my sorrow. And it washes through me. So I'm not resisting it, but it actually is an energy, right? And so this agitator, this person that's my soulmate, betrays me, hurts me, whatever. And I'm not saying or acknowledging in any way, form that behavior is okay. But just like if that is what makes me dig a little deeper, that guy signed up and said, I'll be the bad guy. I'll be the one to stimulate. I'll be the one to say the exact thing. Could be a parent, could be a friend, could be a lover, could be a stranger, whoever. I signed up for this because I love this person so much that I want them to grow. So I'm going to hurt them really bad. And that's going to make them grow. And that's because I love them. So it's not what people think here. Like there is a bigger context to all of these things. It's not as easy as saying, oh, I'm no longer going to be triggered. Because the minute you say that, there'll be a speck. Like I recently went through a really horrendous divorce. I waited 28 years to get married again to somebody who was very deceptive. And I mean, it's almost embarrassing to talk about because I think I'm a very enlightened person. How could I have chosen such a person to be my mate? How could I have been fooled? And, in that dark night of the soul, what happened to me is that I was thrown back into the past, back into the corner, shriveling, crying little girl. And there was a part of me that needed to still be healed. And I was like, wait, I thought I healed you. Like there was still this part of me that felt unworthy, that felt abandoned. And this person, this agitator, right, did exactly the thing and that would make me go back and have to revisit that and heal another part of my soul. So in truth, even though it was not a pleasant experience, and I have to say I would never recommend it for anyone, but I'm grateful because I am a stronger person, I'm a nicer person, I'm a more compassionate person because of this experience. And so it's not as black and white as many, at least from my perspective, as people may think.
No, and I agree with you. We are here to be human. That's why we're here. We're just a soul potentially on the other side. So certainly to have those experiences in full and learn from them as much as we can would be a key objective, I believe. And, takes us right into number three, which is for you with the OBE, the out of body experience you had tethered by light. What did you learn about safety and surrender?
So, what I learned, the most important thing in that out of body experience when I was in this luminous presence, this fog of light that was all encompassing and unfathomable, unmeasurable love, is I was shown that we are so loved that there is nothing you could do that would make you unworthy of love, that every tear is counted, every breath is known. You are surrounded by beings of light that have loved you not just for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 100 years, but for lifetimes. It's unfathomable. You have guides who you're more attached to because they have been guiding you throughout your evolutionary process. And you're not alone. You have a soul family. So in my meditations at night, I do this. I call upon my spiritual family for help. And I had this experience one time, Brad, that I don't talk about a whole lot, but I'll share with you. Shortly after the near-death experience, I was really fascinated because it was so overwhelming for me. So I read, I'm a voracious reader, by the way. I read like a book or two a week. Like I can inhale books. Like I just love reading. I love learning. So I have probably read 400 books on near-death experience, every book that you can imagine. And I have a very high retention rate on what I read. So anyway, I was watching this documentary called The Veil is Lifting. If you haven't watched it, it's a good, I think it's on YouTube or Netflix or something. But as I was watching this, it's talking about, near-death experiences, this, that, and the other. And then I hear this noise in the kitchen. And I was a single woman. I was home alone. I had cameras everywhere because I always had cameras inside and outside the house because I was always going to take good care of my kids. But anyway, so I said, well, I bet there's a rodent or something in the kitchen because I heard this noise. And so I went and I saw on the cameras, and there was me and there was these 3 balls of light. And I was like, oh, so there's dust on the camera. There's something wrong with the camera. And I watched myself walk out of the room, and I watched the balls of light, orbs, followed me. And then I watched myself walk back in, and I was like, oh, that's a very intelligent dust particle, because they were kind of like just hovering around me. So then I Googled it. Of course I Googled it, like balls of light following me. Like, what is this? And the word orb came up. So then I put in orb, and then this video came up on YouTube, and it was a woman in her, she was in the hospital with her mom, who was, I guess, in hospice, ready to leave the planet. And she was filming her, and she had all this radiant display of lights around her, orbs and sparkling lights, and just shooting up. And it was just this beautiful expression. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, I guess I'm about to die, because this mother was about to die. So I was like, oh, this is like 30 years ago, right? I was like, oh, that must mean I'm about to die. I was like, and then I've always been very untethered to my body. So death never made me afraid. I was just curious about it. So then I was like, well, what is she doing? She's filming that. So I said, well, why don't I film myself purposefully meditating? And this is something that I offer to a lot of my students who want more validation of that there is something more to this world. So what I would do is I put my camera, not on selfie mode, by the way, it has to be out towards you in a dark room with the light on, like the camera light on you, and meditating. And I always, to your point about sound, I put a high vibrational music on, because that, and I do this for all my meditations, because it's like Pavlov's dogs. It takes me right to that meditative space of high vibration. And the reason this is important is because love and fear cannot exist in the same space. So this takes you to a higher frequency where you invite your spiritual family, which, by the way, when you leave your body, they've already proven that there is a loss of weight when you leave the body, a certain, I'm not even sure how much it is, but they can also film like this presence leaving the body. But the presence, it coalesces into an orb, and this orb is not exactly round, it's different shapes and different particularities. But anyway, so I started filming myself meditating, and I've got thousands of videos of me meditating with these bursting balls of light around me. And it's not just me. I mean, you can go to Google and you can Google this, and there'll be many videos where, especially now that there's cameras in everybody's house, like cameras of babies, you'll see these orbs circling around babies while they're sleeping. And the thing about it is, if there's fear, like if you're afraid, like if you think this is a ghost or something like that, you will not, or you're in a very low place. And this is the kind of sad thing about it, because orbs can't, or your angels or your soul family can't show up when you're in a dark place. When you kind of like need them the most, even though they're there, you won't be in tune because your energy's off, right? You have to get your energy up to to be able to have them in your presence. Anytime I'm in a bad place, I'm mad or I'm confused or I'm unhappy, and I go into meditation, I may have one or two orbs. Other times I'll have like 500, orbs around me. It's all about my energy, not that they don't love me. It's about, there's different realms. So everything in the universe exists in the same space. There is no time. Everything's happening at the same time. So when I attune to a higher frequency, I'm actually in a different dimension, but in the same space that's at a different frequency. And so it's very comforting to know that we live in this multidimensional universe, and that we can connect with our loved ones and our soul family of many lives. And it can be very, for those out there who say, oh, I want to have a near-death experience, you do not. Let me just say that. You do not want to be thrown off a cliff. You do not want to have your face broken. You don't want to have your neck broken. But if you want something very simple to do, and I always recommend, because you're probably going to have some fear when you first do this, the room has to be dark, the light has to be on, put your music on. And the first couple of times you'll probably have no orbs. And some people do have orbs anyway, but just keep showing up 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Eventually it becomes so familiar that the fear will go away. And this is when you'll start to see your soul family. It was very comforting for me because I always wanted family, and family was the thing that was really difficult for me in my childhood. Because although I knew my mother loved me, we weren't a very united family. And then, I got married, and I was really happy to be married into this Latin family because it was like this big, Latin family. But then, I got divorced, and I lost that part of my family, and it can feel very lonely. Both of my parents are gone. And, so it's so comforting to have your soul family who's loved you, not just 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but 500 million, trillion, billion, unfathomable amount of years from the beginning of time to the end of time and beyond, without conditions.
Yes, that's great that you can then see them as orbs around you, for sure. All right. Well, hey, that brings us to question number 4, which is, what is a love letter to soul you wish you'd heard before you crashed?
That's a really good question. I would say probably the first love letter in the book, because it talks about love, the unconditionality of love. It is a message where it's, although I am the narrator, it's as though the universe is speaking through me and to everyone that's reading the book. And it's just talking about how unconditionally loved we are and how we're all connected. And it was as though somebody was just saying, hey, Brad, I love you. I love your darkness. I love your light. I love you on your best day and your worst day and every day in between. You're doing a good job. I'm here for you, and I love you.
Nice. Everybody needs to hear that message for sure. That goes a long way. And they need to tell themselves that too. That's wonderful. And it brings us into 5, which is, after the crash vision that you had of this sunrise, sunset, cut grass, and touch, as we talked about before, how do you keep that awe in your daily life?
It's amazing because since that's happened, my perception of life is so different. And it's not just the sunset and it's everything. It's every time I see someone's eyes and see the life in them, and I see an ant walking across the pavement, and I see the sun in the sky and the clouds and the rain, it's not like I try to keep it alive. It's like there's no way not to see it.
Aha, you see it in everything. I love it. Those were just the examples that brought it to your attention. That's wonderful. Hey, well, that brings us into 6, which is if each soul is here for bliss, what does your Tuesday afternoon bliss look like now?
This is my bliss right here. And I think one of the things I think is kind of sad in our society is that people work so hard to have a vacation, or they work so hard for Friday night to have fun when we don't even know if we're going to arrive to Friday night. That's a possibility, but it's not. So all we have for sure is this moment. And, like, let's just say in this moment you had a headache. Well, that's your bliss right then. Like, oh, wow, I get to experience a headache. That's bliss. So it's all about perception, not about what happens. It's about you start to appreciate just the fact that you're human and the human experience and the shadow and the light and the joy and the sorrow. Can you imagine a world where you didn't have the ability to feel sadness? I mean, it would be such a sad world.
Very true. And it's nice that if you're consciously aware enough, you can choose that.
Well, that sadness becomes part of your joy. Like, let's say you lost someone you love. I mean, there's a sadness that's kind of joy that you love them so much that you can feel this depth of sorrow.
Oh, without a doubt. And there's many people that have, and a lot of those folks do watch these programs here, that's for sure. And in fact, this number 7 question, the last one here, is actually just for that, which is if love is undifferentiated light, what's the first step someone in pain can take today?
So the first step is to recognize that you are not what's happened to you or what's happening to you. You're not your pleasure, you're not your pain. You are the experiencer who gets to have the experience. And truthfully, nothing is happening to you, but everything is happening for you. And you're so very loved. And I know when horrid things and terrible things happen in life and painful things, it's easy when you're not in pain to say pain is part of your joy. But when you're in the depths of sorrow and pain, it's hard to experience that. So many times we don't really get to know that until the other side of the pain. So there's this opportunity when we are in it to just ask for help and guidance.
And I know I've heard you talk about this before, which is like the movie screen. Like life is being projected on the movie screen like consciousness. And if you went into a theater and you asked the audience, is the movie happening to you or for you? Well, they would all say, well, it's happening for me. It's entertainment. And you would say, as soon as the movie's gone, even there was blood splatter in the movie, the screen is perfectly clean. So that's our life. It's not happening to us.
But the thing I'd like to say is that when you're in the middle of that pain and that sorrow, it's hard to know that, and that's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up for not knowing that in that moment, because I mean, there's some places in life that are so hard and so heavy that it's hard to understand how this could even be possible. And I can give you examples, but I won't. But you can just imagine things that are so hard and so horrific that it's hard to reconcile. Even for someone who's enlightened, it's hard to reconcile. Or the pain is so profound that it's hard to imagine why we would choose that for our lives. But what I want to end with on that is that it's such a loving universe that nothing would ever happen to you that your soul didn't choose. And it's hard to understand that in the moment, but when you have the broader spectrum later, it will make sense.
And when they keep that in mind, and that certainly helps, but each day is difficult, oftentimes what really helps is connecting with someone like yourself. So why don't we just take a minute and share the ways that you are reaching out and helping people?
Okay. So the ways that I like to reach out and help, one of the most important things that I'm doing, first I wrote the book, obviously, both the audio and the written book that's on Amazon, Love Letters to Your Soul. But secondly, what I do is I teach yoga, and I have 3 yoga studios. Well, actually, we just closed 2 yoga studios in Dallas now, 2 yoga teacher training centers, which I love to share my wisdom and my love there. That's another way. I'm also an artist, by the way. And I just opened up a gallery here in Dallas, Texas. So I'm now showing my work in a gallery. But more personally, what I've been doing as a Shiva or a Seva offering is I have a crystalraysoul.com, and there is a page there where you can sign up to have a 30-minute talk with me about whatever it is that you need to talk about. Because When I was young and I was looking for help, it felt like everyone just wanted to hurt and take advantage of me. And I felt so alone. And I just remember thinking, why can't somebody just be nice and help me? And here's the great gift is because I get to be that person. So that's what I offer. And I think that's one of the most important things that I do is that I'll schedule a meeting with you and share my love and wisdom with you for a 30-minute session because I can and it brings me joy.
And there's nothing better than joy, love, and bliss. So thank you for being the messenger and bringing that to folks. As we wrap up now, is there any final message you'd like to share with people?
You're not alone. You're loved far more than you could possibly imagine. We are all in this together, and if you're hearing these words, then they're meant for you. In fact, they've been traveling towards you for many lives to remind you of what your soul already knows. You are a divine child of the loving universe, and you matter far more than you could probably even know. And you're held in light, and it's all going to work out, and everything's going to be okay. Maybe not the way you would imagine, but better.
Ah, I like that. That's a lot of encouragement there. And the notion, which I think is amazing, is it isn't always the way you think you want it to go or end up. But maybe it's the case that your soul already has this figured out and has it mapped out for you, and it's going to be better than you think. And it's here, the experience that you really need at this time. It's hard to believe, hard to imagine, but it might be true. Well, Chrystal, your story is like a map back to the simple, sacred things. As sunrise, the smell of cut grass, like you mentioned before, in the real embrace. In the light, she was shown that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence, and that our lives are measured not by trophies, but by quiet kindness. And the question she carries home is disarmingly simple. What is my most loving response? Well, you can just live by that. Well, if her journey stirred something in you, let tonight be a reset. Step outside and watch the sky change. Offer someone kindness and expect nothing in return. Hold a loved one like you mean it, and let your imagination begin to rewrite what hurt into what heals. You are not your past or your pain. You are light. Chrystal, thanks for sharing that with us, and thanks for sharing your message and your light with everyone today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, if Crystal's message moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let us know in the comments. I love getting busy in the comments. And if this episode spoke to your heart, well, share it with someone who might need a little light today. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go way beyond the illusion to discover your true self. So take care, everyone, and bye for now.